Meet David Pokora, a 22-year-old with shoulder-length blonde hair, a sharp mind for computers, and a habit of living under aliases, Xenon and Xenome. A student of computer science and an avid gamer, David is deeply embedded in the Xbox modding scene. His interests: tweaking consoles, breaking security, and writing game cheats for titles like Halo and Call of Duty. But right now, David has a more mundane issue. His car's bumper is broken. The dealership refuses to ship parts to Canada, so he asks his friend Justin, who lives in the US, to help out. Justin agrees, and David plans an 8-hour drive from Canada to Wilmington, Delaware, to pick up the bumper. He invites his dad to tag along so they can take turns driving. At the US border, the officer scans their passports. Nothing unusual until he notices something strange pop up on the screen. The name Xenon. The officer's curiosity is piqued. "What's a Xenon?" he asks. David tenses up. That's his online handle. How does it show up in a passport control system? Before he can process what's happening, two officers approach the car with weapons drawn. David is ordered out of the vehicle. He's under arrest. What he thought was a casual road trip turns out to be a trap. Unbeknownst to David, he's been under FBI surveillance for years. He's a core member of a group that would eventually be known as the Xbox Underground, a notorious crew of teenage hackers responsible for a series of audacious cyber attacks on some of the world's largest tech companies. They weren't in it for politics or even necessarily for profit. Most of them were just kids, brilliant, curious, and reckless. David showed signs of genius early. In elementary school, he built his own web browser and taught himself to code. When Microsoft released the original Xbox in 2001, it marked a turning point in David's world. A black and green beast of a console with the aesthetic of a nuclear reactor, the Xbox was unlike anything before. David fell in love with both the games and the machine itself. He became obsessed with its hardware, cracking it open, modding the system, and booting up custom software. Alongside a growing online community, he installed Linux, streamed music, and even ran Nintendo games on the Xbox. His programming skills quickly earned him respect. He wrote mods for Halo that altered gravity, weather, and game physics. Then came the Xbox 360 in 2005. This time, Microsoft had learned from past mistakes, and the new console featured far more robust security. To properly hack it, you needed a development kit, dev kit, a special version of the console reserved for game developers. These kits were strictly regulated, nearly impossible for an outsider to get. Until, that is, someone stumbled upon a massive stash of them at a recycling yard. Microsoft had likely tried to dispose of them, but now someone was selling them online. In 2008, David bought several dev kits and sold a few himself. That's how he met Justin May, the same friend from Wilmington who'd later be involved in more than just shipping car parts. With access to a dev kit came access to PartnerNet, a private network where developers uploaded early versions of games for testing. David dove in head first. He spent countless nights scouring the servers, capturing screenshots, and posting his findings in online forums. He was skipping class, his grades were slipping, but he didn't care. In his eyes, this could be his way into the industry. Then came Dylan Wheeler, a 14-year-old in Perth, Australia, who called himself Super Day Online. Dylan had already gotten in trouble for hacking his school's network twice. He was rebellious, brash, and fascinated by the underground Xbox scene. Also joining the group was Sunad Muneri, aka Sonic, a 24-year-old from New Jersey with a room full of electronics, a soldering iron, and a deep passion for tech. Together with David and Justin, these young men started peeling back the layers of Xbox security, poking around PartnerNet, and testing unreleased games long before launch. But it wasn't long before curiosity gave way to more serious activity. In 2009, David figured out how to run cheats for a brand new Call of Duty game. He built a server that gave players outrageous advantages, walking through walls, perfect accuracy, and charged $100 for 30 minutes of access. It was a goldmine. David started making up to $8,000 a day. He took his girlfriend to upscale restaurants and stayed in luxury hotels. Activision, the studio behind Call of Duty, wasn't amused. They hit him with cease and desist letters and threatened legal action. David ignored them. They're just video games, he thought. I'm not hacking banks. But he was wrong. Things were about to escalate far beyond cheat codes. One night, Dylan got a message from a friend, a text file full of usernames and passwords, harvested from a forum run by Epic Games, the developer of Gears of War and Unreal Tournament. Among the leaked data was the login info of an Epic IT employee. Dylan tried the credentials on the guy's Gmail, and it worked. He dug deeper and found an internal password, admin 060606. That unlocked the Epic Games network. He reached out to David immediately. Both of them knew they were now treading into dangerous waters. They made a pact not to touch customer data or financial info, just games. They explored the servers for months and finally struck gold, an early build of Gears of War 3, complete with source code. They couldn't believe it. The early build of Gears of War 3 was a major breakthrough, and the trio, David, Dylan and Xenone, knew it. The unfinished version still had rough textures, placeholder menus and glitches, but that didn't dull the excitement. They were among the first in the world to experience a blockbuster title months before release. Xenone, who had the tools to mask his IP address, volunteered to download the enormous file, hundreds of gigabytes transferred through the night onto his machine. By dawn he had it. He then split the data across 8 Blu-ray discs and discreetly mailed them to David, labeling the package innocently as wedding videos. David and Justin each got their copies. Within days, the unfinished game leaked onto torrent sites and download forums, making international news. Epic Games released a statement confirming the breach, warning players against downloading the unofficial build. The warning suggested it could damage consoles, a claim probably more about deterring pirates than an actual threat. As media outlets covered the leak, Dylan and David began to worry. One email they stumbled upon while combing through Epic's internal correspondence chilled them. Epic had contacted the FBI. The federal investigation had officially begun. David started locking things down, encrypting his hard drives and distancing himself. Xenone, always cautious, decided to lay low. But Dylan wasn't so easily spooked. If anything, the looming risk only made things more thrilling for him. His brazen attitude paid off, at least temporarily. While snooping through Epic's systems, Dylan discovered a USB drive left connected to the network. On it was a digital treasure, a document detailing high-level access credentials for nearly every critical part of Epic's infrastructure. He now had master keys. From that point forward, Dylan infiltrated the company daily, navigating through employee workstations and, disturbingly, activating webcams to observe developers in real time. He was halfway around the world in Perth, but virtually he might as well have been in the office with them. His tactics weren't highly technical. He thrived on exploiting human slip-ups, password reuse, unpatched vulnerabilities, leftover logins. He turned common mistakes into major openings. Eventually, the group expanded their targets. No longer satisfied with just one company's data, they began breaching multiple networks. Major players across the gaming and tech industry were suddenly in their crosshairs. Microsoft, EA, Valve, Blizzard, Activision, even Intel and AMD. Every successful breach emboldened them further. New unreleased titles were pulled directly from developer servers. David, Justin, Dylan and Xenone were in the midst of a digital feeding frenzy, collecting pre-release games, proprietary code and confidential design documents. Sometimes they sold the data. David started making quiet deals through intermediaries, using Justin to communicate with a buyer known online as Xbox Dev Guy. But even then, many of their actions weren't motivated by greed. These were digital thrill seekers who saw themselves more as renegade explorers than criminals. They still hosted gaming nights, inviting friends over to play titles that hadn't even been announced yet. They were hackers, yes, but gamers first. As word spread of the group's exploits, others wanted in. New members were carefully brought into the fold. One of them was Austin Alcala, a reserved but smart 16-year-old from Indiana who went by the handle AA Monkey. Then came Nathan LaRue, an 18-year-old from Maryland who was homeschooled and deeply into FIFA modding. Online, he called himself Anime Freak. With new recruits, their operations widened. No longer limited to the gaming industry, they probed corporate systems far beyond their original scope: Google, Disney, Warner Brothers, and even hardware manufacturers. Then, one summer night in 2012, Austin and Nathan made a discovery that would push them into even more dangerous territory. While poking around the systems of Zombie Studios, a developer known for military-themed games, they found a hidden access point that led somewhere unexpected, a server belonging to the US military. The file system belonged to a defense simulator project. It contained assets for a new game-like software, commissioned by the Pentagon called H-64D Apache Simulator, a training tool designed for the military. Austin and Nathan were stunned. This was well beyond anything they had touched before. Until now, they'd been dancing around the edges of corporate secrecy. But this was national defense infrastructure. Still, curiosity outweighed caution. They downloaded the files. This marked the high point and the most dangerous phase of their journey. Their crew, now informally dubbed Xbox Underground, had breached nearly 24 companies. The stakes had escalated dramatically, and the risk of real consequences was more present than ever. Yet, they pressed on, convinced of their invincibility. They even joked about what they'd call themselves if they ended up behind bars. Xbox Underground had a certain ring to it after all. But behind the scenes, tensions were rising. Trust was wearing thin. Justin, who had once been a core member, was now drawing suspicion. Back in 2010, he'd been caught red-handed at PAX East, a gaming convention in Boston. Trying to sneakily copy a developer's game demo off their system, he was stopped, arrested, and oddly released not long after. He'd even tried bribing police officers and reportedly dropped names of others in the group during questioning. David and Dylan wondered, had Justin flipped? The group kept their distance for a while, wary of betrayal, but Justin later reappeared, claiming he was running scams against companies like Cisco and Lenovo, returning products fraudulently. His actions didn't scream undercover informant, but some, like Sonad, remained skeptical. It didn't matter. The momentum of the group carried them forward, and soon they'd pull off one of their boldest moves yet, building a console that hadn't been released to the public. As the summer of 2012 wore on, Xbox Underground reached a new high, or perhaps a new low. While digging through Microsoft's developer servers, David and Dylan stumbled upon a file directory with restricted access. Only a select handful of engineers were authorized to view its contents. That alone made it intriguing. When they bypassed the permissions, what they found left them speechless. Schematics, source code, circuit diagrams, and renderings of Microsoft's next-generation gaming console. Codenamed Durango, it would later launch publicly as the Xbox One. They had landed on the blueprints for a console that hadn't even been announced yet. Every line of code, every image of the motherboard layout, and internal documentation on development tools, it was all there. It was as if they'd broken into a vault and found the future of gaming. Rather than leak the materials online, they decided to take it a step further. The components shown in the documentation weren't custom-built or impossible to obtain. They were off-the-shelf parts, available to those who knew where to look. The group pooled resources and shipped everything to Nathan's home in Maryland. He volunteered to assemble it. Soon, an actual working prototype of the next-gen Xbox console sat on his desk. There was just one problem: they didn't have any compatible software to test it. That didn't matter. The hardware alone was valuable, and they had a buyer lined up. Someone from the Seychelles was willing to pay $5,000 for the prototype. The team agreed to let Justin handle the delivery. He drove from Delaware to pick up the unit from Nathan's house. He claimed he'd handle the shipping personally. But then, silence. The package never arrived. The buyer never got their console. Panic set in. Had the FBI intercepted the shipment? Had Justin run off with the money and the hardware? With tensions already high, this failed deal triggered a wave of suspicion. Then Dylan made things worse again. Without consulting the others, Dylan uploaded images of the custom-built Xbox prototype to eBay. He listed the item for public sale and included specs, claiming it was a rare unreleased development console. The listing caught fire. Within days, the bids soared past $20,000. Tech blogs picked up the story. Microsoft responded swiftly, issuing copyright infringement claims and having the auction pulled offline. But the damage was done. The group, once hidden in the shadows of obscure IRC chats and encrypted forums, was now in the spotlight. Microsoft had proof someone was in possession of confidential hardware. They were furious, and the authorities were already watching. To make matters worse, Dylan began doing interviews under his hacker alias, Super Day, openly discussing the prototype and defending the community's right to explore hardware. He might as well have walked into an FBI office and handed them a map. David was livid. So was Sonad. Dylan had made an impulsive decision that put everyone at risk again. His behavior, reckless calls to developers, public statements, boasting was now endangering more than just reputations. It was risking freedom. David decided to cut ties with Dylan entirely. But the fallout continued. The FBI ramped up its investigation. Just weeks after the eBay incident, agents raided Nathan's home. He was arrested on the spot. Not long after, agents came knocking on Sonad's door as well. Though he had tried to lie low after the leak, his connection to the group was undeniable. He was taken into custody too. Sonad quietly sent a copy of the search warrant to David and the remaining members. And Dylan, true to form, took that information and posted it online. Worse, he included the names of the FBI agents involved and made violent threats, claiming he'd send hitmen after them. The post was deleted soon after, but the damage had already been done. He would later say it was a joke. No one laughed. In February 2013, Dylan was arrested in Australia. While the group unraveled under legal pressure, two members tried to pivot. Austin, the quiet teen from Indiana, had started copying Nathan's techniques for faking FIFA coins, turning it into a tidy little business. Justin was busy with another round of corporate scams, this time returning expensive items fraudulently to major tech retailers. David, aware of the growing legal noose, went quiet for a while, but then came another temptation. At a concert one night, Austin called David with wild news. A new hacker, an 18-year-old named Armin, claimed he could steal a real Xbox prototype directly from Microsoft's campus. David was skeptical at first. Armin, known online as Cyber Armin, said he'd already been sneaking onto the Microsoft campus for months using a cloned employee access card. He even had a company hoodie to blend in. The plan was as insane as it was real. One night around 9 p.m., Armin parked near one of Microsoft's massive office buildings. Calm, focused, and dressed to not stand out, he made his way inside. He'd done this before, but never to actually steal something. He wandered through halls and open-plan offices until he found what he was looking for, a small cubicle stacked with development kits. His hands shook as he grabbed 3 Xbox prototype units, stuffed them into his backpack, and walked out. By the time he got home, it was done. He shipped 1 unit to Austin, another to David, and kept the third. Ironically, just a week later, Microsoft called Armin. They'd reviewed his application for an internship and offered him a job. He'd achieved a lifelong dream. Briefly, a few weeks into his new role, security footage from the night of the theft surfaced. Armin was promptly fired and arrested. By early 2014, Xbox Underground was no longer a secret club. It was a collapsing house of cards. The authorities, now armed with search warrants and surveillance data, moved swiftly. Raids were carried out, computers were seized, lives were upended. It started with Austin Alcala, aka AA Monkey. Just after New Year's, 4 FBI agents arrived at his family's Indiana home. He was taken into custody without much resistance. A few months later, David Pokora, now back in Canada, was also apprehended, not in a raid, but during a border crossing. David had decided to make a road trip to visit a friend. But when he handed over his passport, a red flag appeared in the system. US Customs knew exactly who he was. He was told to step out of the car, placed in handcuffs, and escorted away. The FBI had been following him for years. By this point, several core members of the crew were either behind bars or being prepared for prosecution. Among them, David, Austin, Nathan, and Sunad. Dylan, arrested earlier in Australia, was now fighting a separate legal battle overseas. The charges weren't just about hacking. The indictment spanned identity theft, fraud, and intellectual property violations, totaling millions of dollars in damages. The evidence, it was staggering. The government's case wasn't built overnight. It had been years in the making. What the group hadn't realized was that their chats, logs, and even voice conversations had been captured somehow. Prosecutors came armed with transcripts and audio recordings from private hacking sessions, where members openly discussed breaching networks, bypassing authentication systems, and selling stolen data. In one chilling snippet played in court, Dylan could be heard bragging, "I've got access to everything, Microsoft, the military, even the Australian defense servers. I just logged in yesterday." They thought they were untouchable. But someone was feeding the FBI everything. That mysterious figure, referenced repeatedly in the court documents as Person A, seemed to be everywhere. They had helped encrypt David's hard drives, connected him to buyers, and even delivered a self-built Xbox prototype directly to the FBI. Then a detail cracked the case wide open. Person A was described as being from Wilmington, Delaware. Within the group, only one person had that connection, Justin May. It began to make a disturbing kind of sense. Justin had been caught trying to steal a game demo at a gaming convention. He had openly named other members of the group during his arrest, and despite being heavily involved in the group's earlier activities, he'd somehow avoided the initial wave of arrests. Had he cut a deal back then? Though no official confirmation came, every clue pointed to Justin having flipped. He had become the FBI's inside man, feeding them technical details, connections, and evidence that led to the group's downfall. The betrayal stung. David and Dylan had once trusted him, mentored him, and brought him into the fold. Now it appeared he had been working both sides all along. As the court proceedings unfolded in the US, each defendant reacted differently. David, ever logical and methodical, decided to cooperate. He met with prosecutors, explaining how the group circumvented corporate firewalls and manipulated internal systems. His insights into network security were so sharp that even federal investigators were reportedly impressed. He was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Upon release, he finished his degree and started working in cybersecurity. It wasn't the future he'd planned, but it gave him a second chance. Austin, also relatively cooperative, avoided jail entirely. Instead, he received probation in exchange for assisting in another fraud case involving forged FIFA coins. He would later rise to a leadership role in a cybersecurity startup. Xenone, however, faced a rougher path. Like David, he served 18 months, but his life after prison unraveled. Despite enrolling in college and finding work, his probation officer imposed harsh restrictions: no internet, no computers, no visits out of state. Even mundane requests were denied. He grew increasingly isolated. Depression set in. Eventually, he turned to drugs, which violated his probation. A judge ordered him back to prison for another 9 months. Only in 2019, after completing that second sentence, was he finally free to use a computer again. He moved in with his sister, determined to rebuild. Perhaps the most heartbreaking fallout came from Nathan LaRue, the quiet, mild-mannered teen from Maryland. He was one of the least active members during the group's most aggressive hacks, but that didn't shield him from prosecution. Terrified of what awaited him in prison, he was placed under house arrest with an ankle monitor while awaiting trial. One day, gripped by fear and despair, Nathan cut off the monitor and tried to flee the country. He paid a friend to drive him to the Canadian border. But police were ready. When they stopped the car, Nathan bolted. He ran across a bridge, ignoring shouts to stop. He was desperate. As officers closed in, he pulled a knife and began harming himself, collapsing before they could restrain him. He survived. But the incident led to a 2-year prison sentence. While incarcerated, Nathan came out as transgender, embracing the name Holly. The prison experience was brutal, and just 1 year after her release, Holly took her own life. Across the globe in Australia, Dylan Wheeler stood apart as the only one who refused to plead guilty. His court battles dragged on for over 3 years. Facing severe charges, he was ordered to surrender his passport, but instead, Dylan fled. He flew to the Czech Republic, a country where he held citizenship through his mother. His escape came at a cost. Authorities later arrested Dylan's mother for allegedly helping him leave the country. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, though Dylan insisted she had nothing to do with it. He resurfaced in the UK, where he launched a cybersecurity firm and started giving talks at tech conferences. He insisted he had changed, that he wasn't hiding, that his youthful mistakes were in the past. Then, in 2020, Dylan shut down his company and disappeared. By 2017, most members of Xbox Underground had served their sentences or vanished into quiet lives. The digital empire they had once built, code by code, breach by breach, had crumbled. But there was one conspicuous loose end: Justin May. While others had faced courts and consequences, Justin had for years remained untouched. It wasn't for lack of criminal activity. After his involvement in the prototype Xbox deal, he hadn't exactly cleaned up his act. He'd shifted gears from hacking and game leaks to large-scale fraud and financial deception. And for a long time, somehow, he evaded prosecution. That changed when authorities finally caught up with him. It wasn't cybercrime that got him, it was money. In 2017, law enforcement raided Justin's home. They found a brand new BMW parked out front, a symbol of wealth that didn't match any known employment records. Inside, they uncovered nearly $440,000 in cash, tucked away in various containers and safes. This wasn't petty theft. This was organized fraud. Justin's schemes involved manipulating return policies at major retailers, selling stolen goods, evading taxes, and laundering illicit earnings through shell accounts and crypto wallets. It was sprawling, bold, and for years, lucrative. But now, it was over. In 2021, Justin was formally convicted. His charges included fraud, fencing stolen property, tax evasion, and money laundering. He was ordered to pay over $4 million in restitution and sentenced to nearly 8 years in prison. The person once suspected of being the FBI's mole, the guy who possibly helped bring down Xbox Underground, was now behind bars himself. If he had flipped to save himself before, it hadn't lasted forever. While Justin's future was now locked behind concrete walls, other members had taken very different paths. David, once the public face of the group, had turned his story into something productive. After serving his sentence, he completed his degree in computer science and started working in cybersecurity. He now helped corporations shore up the very weaknesses he once exploited. He avoided public interviews, preferring quiet redemption to notoriety. His skill, however, was undeniable. From a teenage console modder to a federal inmate, and now to a white-hat hacker, his journey was a full arc marked by regret and growth. Austin, too, turned his talents toward legitimate tech work. The boy who once built FIFA coin generators became the head of cybersecurity at a growing social media startup. He kept a low profile, but those who worked with him knew his backstory. His turnaround had been swift and successful. Sanad, after years of hardship, slowly began to rebuild. Post-prison life had dragged him into depression and addiction, but after his second sentence ended in 2019, he committed to staying clean. He moved in with his sister and re-entered college. For the first time in years, he was allowed to use a computer, and he used it to start over. Though haunted by the past, Sanad had one advantage: he had survived it. Dylan Wheeler, the firebrand from Australia, remained an enigma. After disappearing in 2020, he left no forwarding address. His cybersecurity firm was shuttered. His online accounts were abandoned. Whether he chose to walk away from public life or was forced into silence, no one could say for sure. There were rumors. He'd been spotted in Europe. He was consulting for anonymous firms. He was off the grid entirely. What was clear was this: Dylan had once been the wildest, loudest member of Xbox Underground, taking interviews, provoking law enforcement and leaking insider tech online. Now he was a ghost. His last known public statement echoed with a kind of resigned clarity. "I did some stupid things as a kid. I learned. I moved on. The world doesn't let you forget, but that doesn't mean you stop growing." But not everyone got a second chance. The story of Holly LaRue, formerly Nathan, remains the most tragic legacy of the group. Her life had been marked by anxiety, fear, and ultimately devastation. She had joined Xbox Underground not out of malice but out of friendship and curiosity. Her involvement had been limited, her technical contributions minor. But when the legal hammer came down, the full weight of the consequences fell on her too. Imprisoned, isolated, and struggling with her identity in a hostile environment, she endured years of trauma. After her release, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, a new life was possible. But the scars ran too deep. In 2018, just a year after her release, Holly took her own life. Her passing sent ripples through the hacking community. Quietly, it became a cautionary tale, not just about the dangers of cybercrime, but about how a system can break people even more than they've broken rules. What Xbox Underground pulled off remains one of the most ambitious, wide-reaching hacking campaigns ever orchestrated by teenagers. They infiltrated some of the world's largest tech companies, accessed classified military simulators, and even reverse-engineered a next-gen gaming console before it was public. And they did it not as a professional spy ring or politically motivated entity, but as gamers, tinkerers, kids with too much time and too much talent, driven by obsession, boredom, and bravado. They weren't freedom fighters, they weren't villains, they were simply young, brilliant minds without a moral compass, until it was far too late. Some found redemption, others disappeared. One never made it out. The saga of Xbox Underground wasn't just about stolen data, unreleased video games, or secret consoles. It was a vivid, chaotic snapshot of an entire generation growing up online. It was about where boundless curiosity meets blurred boundaries, and how ambition, when unchecked by ethics or experience, can become dangerous. What united this group wasn't ideology or money. It was passion for gaming, for technology, and for unlocking what others said was off-limits. They weren't trying to destroy, they wanted in. And yet, they left a trail of chaos. David, Dylan, Sanad, Holly, Austin, Justin, these weren't hoodie-wearing masterminds living in bunkers. They were students, gamers, teenagers on forums, with usernames instead of names, avatars instead of faces. Some hacked because they wanted to play games early, others because they liked the challenge. A few eventually saw profit, but none of them imagined how far it would go, or how hard it would hit when it came crashing down. That's what makes this story so compelling. It's not about high-level espionage or rogue governments. It's about ordinary kids making extraordinary mistakes. Mistakes that cost them years. That cost one of them their life. The legal system was not forgiving. For many, it didn't matter whether they stole credit cards or just tinkered with source code. There was no nuance, just laws broken. There was no nuance, just laws broken. Some, like David and Austin, found paths forward. They proved that the same skills that led them to digital crime could be redirected towards cybersecurity, education, and rebuilding. They paid for their choices and then used what they learned to build something better. Others, like Dylan and Justin, drifted into infamy. Dylan vanished. Justin paid the price far later, but paid it nonetheless. And then there was Holly, a life ended not by prison time but by a system ill-equipped to support vulnerable people when they're at their lowest. Her story is a reminder that justice must be more than punishment. It must understand, adapt, and evolve. The tale of Xbox Underground raises difficult questions. What happens when brilliance isn't guided? How do we treat young people who commit serious digital crimes? When should we draw the line between a prank and a federal offense? And most importantly, how do we prevent the next David Dillon or Holly from going down the same path? The answer isn't in fear, it's in education, mentorship, and accountability, not just punishment, because talent without guidance can become destructive, but with direction, it can build the future. Xbox Underground hacked into nearly 25 major corporations, breached defense simulators, leaked unreleased blockbusters, and nearly built a black market version of the Xbox One before the world knew it existed. All of it started with a love of gaming. And all of it ended in prison cells, courtroom statements, and in one tragic case, a funeral. In the years since, the tech world has changed dramatically, but the story of these young hackers remains a cautionary tale, one that reminds us of the fine line between genius and recklessness. A line crossed one keystroke at a time. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as gripping as we did, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more true stories from the underground corners of tech, gaming, and cybersecurity. Let us know in the comments. Do you think justice was served? Should hackers like David and Dylan be punished or recruited? And if you want to support the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. More jaw-dropping stories are on the way. This has been the kid who hacked Xbox. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay safe.